Specialized has launched a radical new gravel bike in the shape of the Diverge STR with front and rear future shocks. And today in this video, we're going to chat to the brains, the genius behind this all new bike, Chris Deluzio. Now, if the name sounds familiar to you, it's because Chris has been in the bike world for a long time. He started with Cannondale back in the 1980s and then joined Specialized, where he's been involved in many and varied projects, from the tarmac carbon race bike to the original future shock on the Roubaix endurance bike, and of course the Smart World aluminium road bikes which bear his name. So without further ado, let's dive in. Can you tell us where this project started? Was it a case of looking at the previous model and then building that, or was it a kind of ground up redesign of the new bike?
Yeah, so this project started with suspension. Well, let's see. No, this project started with seat post compliance.
Okay.
And it started with making I think it's called the Terra seat post. And it's our very flexible fiberglass seat post. And we found some limits in how compliant it could be. And that led us to, so some people were very happy, the lighter people, and some people were not as happy. It was traveling too much. So we had to compromise on, for some people, and to satisfy others. So we saw some limitations when it was a one-size-fit-all solution.
Okay.
But we saw the benefits of a more compliant rear end, and it makes sense. And at that same time, we were doing rear suspension gravel testing. So we had FSRs with drop bars. We had, forks on bikes and, epics set up, everything. We did everything. And we had shootouts, blind tests, all kinds of terrain. And interesting feedback that, the full suspension with the drop bar, the epic, super light, ready to go. Everyone who rode it said this would be awesome if it had flat bars. And it was like, well, yeah, because it's an epic. But we had changed the handling, everything to be road bike. It wasn't a mountain bike, not even close. But it was just that sensation of the way you handle a bump and the way the wheel moves to absorb the bump. It's a mountain bike experience. And that really came across. And the bikes that were shining were they were about suspending the rider, and so that gave us a direction, mostly a direction not to go.
Okay.
And it highlighted the benefits of suspending the rider, which we had a lot of experience with the Future Shock on the front.
Quite a few people say that when talking about gravel bikes, you're better off with a mountain bike, a full suspension or a hardtail. What would you say to those people?
I think they have a valid point depending on the riding that they do and the experience that they're looking for. When we think about gravel riding, it's an extension of road riding. And to us, a double diamond frame has the snap, it has that response that we want, it has the handling, it'll hold the line. And a mountain bike will not do that the way you want it to. A mountain bike will typically have a fork on the front, and that's sapping your power away, and we don't. The road athlete doesn't want that on their bike, at least in our experience. So we have a lot of positive feedback with the Future Shock and Suspend the Rider, and we wanted to build on that. And road riders in general are very sensitive to any power loss, right? Not that mountain bike riders aren't, but in our experience, on a mountain bike, to get up a little rise, you'll sit down and pedal up it. On a road bike or a gravel experience, you stand up and get over it quickly. And you just use the snap of the bike and get over the climb.
So suspending the rider is about retaining the performance and the handling of a road bike or gravel bike and avoiding some of the kind of the suspension side effects, in a way, of a mountain bike.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, so the Future Shock on the front being successful and popular for 2 generations of Diverge, was putting that concept on the back of the frame a fairly obvious step or was there quite a process to go through before you got to where you are with the new frame that we've seen today?
Yeah, it wasn't obvious at all. Once we understood that we didn't want to suspend the wheel, you basically start over. And because if you use a suspension seat post in a normal way, you have some benefit to the rider, but so many negatives of saddle height change.
Okay.
You have uncontrolled rebound. You have a not very nice saddle feels. Some of them move around more than you want. You have a very high added weight. So you kind of lose that snap. The bike's lazy. They're not very good looking. Some are better than others. So you get a lot of good, but too much not so good. And certainly not as, you wouldn't build a line around a product like that. And it wasn't, but it was good direction, right? So that's like, okay, well, people like the way it rides, but how can we, tune it to something that actually works? So that's our first clue, and that goes back to the Roubaix, and we understand the Roubaix and how to get compliance with that. And you can see a little bit of hint with that, with the dropped clamp inside the seat tube. And you can also see that we retain the double diamond by keeping the top tube where it is typically. So we didn't compromise the frame stiffness by just dropping the top tube and having more seat post exposed. So that you can kind of see the idea before it was an idea, right? It's just like a solution to get the compliance we needed on a Roubaix.
We've seen some concepts of work in progress. I'm fascinated by the steps you take to get to your goal, which probably don't always seem obvious. That goal you're trying to achieve when you're working on the prototype we've seen. So can you talk about the process of developing those ideas and some of the eureka moments you might have had to get to where you are now? And is it sometimes kind of a struggle to get these ideas out of your head and into sort of a concept form that you can ride? And
yeah, that's a great question. So it's impossible to answer, and this is a very practiced answer from me, because every situation is different. So sometimes, most of the time when I'm working on something, there's no question to answer. I have to come up with, or the team has to come up with, the question. And when you have a question or a problem, you can work on a solution. So those steps, find a problem, work on a solution. Normally when you find that solution, there's problems that you're finding along the way. So there is no, this is how I do it answer. And a lot of what I do is busy work in immersion into the problem, right? So it's like all this thinking goes into the problem that you're solving with no end in sight. There's never an end. Otherwise, I'd just skip to the end.
Okay, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's always, well, I got this, it's all I got, I'll just do it and ride it and prove the point. And so the time you spend doing that, sometimes you're like, wait, now I know what to do, and you just take a right turn. You just drop what you're doing because you got a better idea. And it might be, I got a better idea for a mountain bike, and then you just drop what you're doing and go over here.
Yeah.
And that's just the way R&D works.
Yeah.
So it's great to show people such a clear road. It's in the prototypes that you saw, it's rarely that easy to lay out, because most of this product development that I do, no one sees. And these are things that people needed to ride to get real feedback, because I can make something that I'm happy with, but that won't scale, right? And these need to be ridden by other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're quite hands-on. You talked earlier about how you make some of the frames yourself. You take a frame, cut it up, and you're trying to prove concept, trying to prove the point, and get other people on board your idea. So that must be it sounds quite an exciting job. You're busy in your sort of workshop, cutting and making these frames. So it must be, you can only do so much, I guess, in CAD and software before you have to kind of roll your sleeves up and get busy. So that must be quite a fun part of the job.
It is. So at the beginning of a project, as far as the work goes, it's 100% CAD.
Okay.
Yeah, CAD, mold design, layout, things like that. And then it switches to shop.
Okay.
And I enjoy them both.
Yeah.
And they both have their meditation and thought that goes in them. So when you're in CAD, you're thinking about how you're going to make it, and when you're making it, you're thinking about how the factory could do it.
Okay.
And it's this cycle of this eventually should be a product.
So when you're developing, you are thinking about how this will be a product.
Yes.
As part of the process, I guess you come up with some crazy designs, but if you couldn't manufacture them on a big scale, that design wouldn't be successful. It has
Correct.
to be a realistic proposition, I guess.
Yep. And that's part of, I'm one person, small part of a big project. So along the lines, people start to come in and go out of the project to help and guide and give input, and also buy-in that this is a viable direction.
Okay. You must get some interesting reactions from colleagues when you first emerge from your workshop after a few weeks busy cutting and welding and doing what you do, and then showing the product, and they're like, what?
It doesn't do me very much good to talk about it.
Okay.
Because if you try to explain to someone what you're going to do, you get some pretty blank stares.
Okay.
Like the first time I explained Future Shock, it was like, you're going to what?
Okay.
Okay, well, give me a week and ride it. And then they're like, okay, we're going to do that.
Okay,
Yeah. And that's really rewarding. Have an idea, a week later, we're doing it. And 2 years later, you see it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating to hear that insight into, not a lot of people who know that Specialized allow you to work in your workshop and make these products and do that prototyping and development of some possibly crazy ideas here and there. And then
the capabilities we have at Specialized it's unimaginable.
And you have the freedom to do that by sounds as well. So they're not putting pressure on you to
machine shop, fully staffed, composites lab, fully staffed. Yeah, it's really, I'm so spoiled.
You mentioned that, I think you said it's one of the biggest projects you've worked on, and you have a history in the bike trade of working on some smart weld and some other big innovations, but you said it's one of the biggest projects you've worked on.
Yeah, one of the biggest, most people, longest gestation. COVID didn't help the process, but it didn't hurt. We used all the time we were given.
Well, you told me earlier you took all the equipment home to your garage to carry on working. I mean, that's commitment, that is.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. To have some quite high-tech stuff in your garage and you carry on.
Really complex mold to make those frames. Yeah.
So I guess my next question, where do you go from here? You've been 3 years longer on this frame, haven't you? Developing it, 5 years of it. What's next then? I guess where can you go? Is this? I mean, you said earlier, is this you never know where your goal is because you're always kind of working towards it. So, I mean, where can you go from here? Have you any thoughts about where you can go from here with the Diverge platform?
Yeah. Well. Again, I probably get asked that a lot, mostly from people I work with. I don't know.
So what's next, Chris?
So especially when it happens all the time, you show someone and but so what are you going to do? I don't know. But I'll let you know in a week or two. It's not a good answer. It's not exciting, but in order to take that next step, that's the investment of my time and everyone else's time. You just got to figure it out. You just got to do the work. And you can see by all those frames, you can't just talk about it. You need to ride it, get the experience of riding it, and get the feedback so that you can take a step that's meaningful and not just push CAD around. Because you can push CAD around all day long and debate all day long. And unless you ride it, no one's talking the same language.
The truth is in the riding, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it really is. That's who we're trying to satisfy ourselves. And to do that, we need to ride it.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's a good note to end on. So thanks for your time. It's been a pleasure to chat to you. And thanks for watching, everybody.